Support for Lab Out Loud is provided by NSTA, the National Science Teaching Association. Find out more about what NSTA has to offer at nsta.org. You're listening to Lab Out Loud, Science for the Classroom, and beyond. And in this episode, we close out Season 14 of Lab Out Loud by taking a look back at the past 14 months that have been during the pandemic. We're going to be talking to a science educator and his two children who have been going through this just like us, and they're here to share some of their thoughts.
Everyone works really hard, and I want to say thank you to all of the science teachers around the world.
People are creating new things because of this, so I think that that's actually really good for things in the future. So, like, if people wanted to use that in the future, it'd be good. Like, when we were in science, instead of, like, putting our eyes in the microscope because we had a microscope unit, people made this, like, technology thing where you can literally plug it in the microscope and then plug it into your computer and you can see it on your camera. And it wasn't that bad because we got to do things, like, new.
That's up next on Lab Out Loud, but first, I'm your co-host, Dale Basler, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Brian Bartel.
Well, welcome back to the show. We have a special treat for us. Some of you who started listening last year remember us connecting with 6 and 9, and you may actually know them as Fred Ende's daughters. And they've grown, obviously, since it's been a year since we've met with them, and actually a little bit more than a year. They're actually now 7 and 11. So we're going to refer to them as 7 and 11. And,
say hello, 7 and 11.
Hello.
So we wanted to check in with 7 and 11 and see how they're doing with school and what they've learned in the last year. So 7, let's start with you. How has the year been?
Good.
Have you been doing school in person, virtually, or a combination, or a little bit of both?
In person, but in the beginning of the year, there would be some people remote and some people in person, but that was only in the very beginning of the year. So now everybody is in person unless they need to go remote.
Were you remote in the beginning?
For some days, because we were some kids were switching off and
Oh, I see. And which one do you like better? Do you like in person better or remote?
in person.
How come?
I feel like I learn more when I'm in person and I can see more. Like, when my teacher is doing stuff and I'm remote, you can't really see what she's doing a lot because she's most likely facing it to the in-person kids.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you liked about the remote? Were there any good things about the remote?
Not really.
Not really.
Okay.
What about 11? How about you? Were you at the same remote and then virtual? Or excuse me, were you the same remote and then in person?
So my school, since it's middle school, it was hybrid. So some people would be in, so like the same exact thing as hers.
Okay.
So were you remote at some times?
Yeah, it was like one day I'm remote, one time I'm in school, one day I'm remote, one time I'm in school.
And how about you? Which one did you like better?
I'm going to say in person too.
Mm-hmm. What made in person better?
So there is some difficulties with being online because like teachers mostly facing the people in the classroom and like there could be like some glitches or like something's not working right. So,
okay.
And also things in front of me are more easier. Like it's easier to learn when things are in front of me, not on a screen.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll ask the same question. Was there anything about the remote that you did like, or was there anything about the remote that was a good quality, something that worked?
So for me, I was always home alone when I was remote. No one was there to watch me, and I'm old enough to do that. So I think it was kind of good to be able to learn and stay home myself for like later on, but not really about school. I don't really know what is really good. Well, at least I don't have to like wear a mask at my house or
yeah.
like have the teacher watching me all the time.
Sure. I remember when we talked last time, you both were learning how to use Zoom and learning like some of the habits of like, muting your microphone and knowing when to talk. You must be complete experts at that stuff now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah.
So you would be comfortable just doing you can do a Zoom conversation with, just do it anytime you need it.
Yeah.
You actually were doing some of that. You were reaching out and connecting with people. Did you continue that?
Our friends, we have friends, and sometimes since we weren't gonna really go see them all the time, they didn't live exactly close, but they didn't live exactly far, and so we used to Zoom with them, and we could still talk. So we would just do normal conversations on Zoom because they knew how to use it too.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to do any science at home?
Well, we had periods too, so yeah, science was one of them when I was virtual.
Okay. How was that experience? What did you have to do, or did you do a lot of science? Like, did you do any experiments at home?
At home, we did. So we did this one called a paper it was paper towel, and I don't remember exactly because it was like in the beginning of the year, but I think we had to have one paper towel and another paper towel, and see which one, when it's dipped in water, which one would dry faster, I think it was, and then we'd record our data, do those things. But that was the only experiment we did at home, but in person we did more.
Sure. Did you have the supplies with you, or did the school provide them for you? Like, did you have to go pick them up?
So when I was virtual, the only things we needed for the project was paper towel. So no, we didn't really.
You can get that at home.
Yeah.
Okay. Same thing for you, Seven. Did you have anything to do at home for science?
We didn't really have any experiments to do at home, mostly because when we would be in school, we would be doing plants, and that would be more at the end of the year. So while being remote, no, I've never really done an experiment or science at home.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Do you think you'll ever do any other school or any kind of learning remotely in the future? Maybe when you get into high school, or taking courses after high school, or anything like that?
So I think if there's another thing that needs us to be home, just say there's another disease, or something, yes, I think we would. And diseases can start from anything, so I'm going to say yes, I think it will happen in the future.
Okay.
Oh. Well, what about if there's no disease? What if there's a course that is just offered online because they can bring in people from all over the world or something like that?
A club?
Yeah, it could be a club. I mean, I think it's possible that you might take a class that some of it is online and some of it is in person. Would you be open to that in the future, or no way?
So actually, what's funny, I think so. Before we even had Zoom, before this, we didn't have. Well, we had FaceTime and stuff.
Sure.
FaceTime, you can also do with people in the world, but I don't know. I just thought no one ever thought of this. This just happened because of, and since everyone's been discovering this, and it's a great app. All of these things, people made Google thing.
Google Meet.
Google Meet.
Yeah, Google Meet. Google Meet.
Sure.
So do you get snow days?
Snow days, we did have snow days when it was snowing.
Well, what if you think, could you do what you did back in the fall during a snow day so you wouldn't lose any learning? What would you think about that?
So since it was snowing outside.
Let's say your district knew that there would be a big storm coming, or like we had a few years ago, we had cold days. It was really too cold to go outside. And if we knew that there was a big stretch coming up and the district said, hey, take home your devices, we're going to do school online for the next few days, what would you think about that?
I'd be very mad because I'd want some days off, like especially when it's like snowing out. Like snowing, it's not really rare, but when it comes, it's only like one season. It's not like it happens all the time. So I'd want to play in it instead of going to school.
Sure.
Do you have, like our school though, we only get 2 snow days, for instance. And if we have more snow days, you have to make up that time. So what if you had like a year where you had 5 snow days and you could either do 3 snow days online or make them up at the end of the year?
I would probably do them online because like summer, you're not supposed to have school. Like it's just supposed to be like, relaxation.
Or summer school, which are probably more like fun classes right now, if you do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd rather do online because it's also easier. Like, you don't have to move. Well, you do have to move to, like, get things, but you don't really have to, like, do anything.
Sure.
So I'd rather do that than having school in summer.
All right.
Do you think you survived all of this?
Huh?
Do you think you survived all of this? The last over a whole year, your school has been so different. Everything's been different. Do you feel like you did it? Like you accomplished something?
I definitely accomplished it. See, it was like totally different, like so different from the year before. But it was kind of like a regular school year. Like the only thing is like we had to wear masks. We couldn't like do things like, well, we couldn't do all things that we usually do because of COVID. But I think that, I accomplished it because I definitely got through the year by doing what I'd usually do in school. And it wasn't that bad because we got to do things like new. Like when we were in science, instead of like putting our eyes in the microscope because we had a microscope unit, people made this like technology thing where you can literally plug it in the microscope and then plug it into your computer and you can see it on your camera. So I think all of these things, people are creating new things because of this. So I think that that's actually really good for things in the future. So like if people wanted to use that in the future, it'd be good. But I definitely think I accomplished it.
That's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that you felt like, yeah, you could do this again if you needed to, and that we got through it. And maybe even there are some benefits that we don't always think about that, hey, we made it through, and I know how to use technology a little bit better. I know how to create with technology a little bit better. What about spending time with each other? Did you get sick of each other, or could you do it more?
I don't know, because me being stuck at home in like the screen, like it's just not like, and being like just with my family the whole day. Like, not that I don't want to do that. It's just very weird because I'm so used to doing things like not staying in the house and like actually learning and not being with them during school.
Okay. Just you and the dog at home.
It was nice having family time.
Yeah.
Ah, sure.
All right.
Well, if next year is a little bit more back to normal and the following year is maybe even the most normal, what are you looking forward to most?
Probably not being 6 feet anymore. Like,
I
don't know, like in school you had to be 6 feet to like do activities. So like in gym, for instance, we can't do things that people would usually do, like tag. Like we can't touch each other. Like it's just so weird. So
yeah.
Like,
I never even thought of that. How do you play tag if you have to social distance?
Yeah, I know. And then we did come up with other games like
flashlight tag. Yeah.
Well, we did come up with other games, and I'm just really going to be happy when it goes back to normal that we don't have to be 6 feet. Like, we can play, like, games that include, like, I don't know, just say duck, duck, goose, where, like, you're touching, like, I don't know.
Sure. Okay, well, is there anything else you think you would like other science teachers to know?
Yeah, wait, so, like, our teachers now?
Any science teacher that might be listening, or any teacher.
Like, if we have to go through this again, what do you want them to know? Or what do you want them to know from going through this successfully?
Yes.
I want them to know that they all did a very good job with helping us and like helping us learn more. And I want to thank them for doing that, because if we didn't have their help, we would not have made it through the year successfully. So I want to say thank you for all the work that they did, and to keep us learning, and like just to, I don't know, learn new things.
And what if you had to do it again? Do you have any advice to say, maybe consider this?
Not really.
Okay.
You're pretty happy with what you got.
Yeah, I'm very thankful.
Seven, anything that you would like to say to everybody before you leave?
I want to say thank you to all of the science teachers around the world and teachers. Everyone works really hard, and yeah.
Well, that's very nice of both of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And I wish you a very fun summer.
Thank you.
You too.
Enjoy.
All right, let's bring Dad in.
Hello, Dad. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Hello, gentlemen.
Well, hello.
Wow, Dad, you won the lottery there with those two. Just so polite, and to end with thanking all the teachers in the world.
All the science teachers in the world.
All the science teachers in the
Yes, all
world.
the science teachers in the world.
Math teachers? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
We don't know that one.
How about you?
All the teachers.
How's it been since we wrote it down? March 15th, 2020 is when we last talked. Wow.
It's been different. I think that captures it. I think on the large scale, it's been awesome to see what students, teachers, leaders, communities have been able to come together and accomplish. I mean, truly, it's been nothing short of amazing when you think about normally how long it takes to move anything in education. You know,
I was thinking the same thing, that decisions were made in like remarkable speed compared to normal.
Right. So that to me was just amazing. And, despite all the challenges, like an amazingly positive outcome for our profession. I think the thing that I lose sleep over, besides like all the individual struggles that people have gone through, is whether we'll allow some of the beneficial changes to stick. I mean, I'm sure it's similar for you gentlemen where you are, but things are moving back to allowing schools to really approach next year in a manner that will feel very similar to pre-pandemic. And my hope is that all the good things that came out of this year, this very different year, won't get lost in people's transitions back to whatever they'll go to.
Sure. This is one of the reasons we wanted to have you on the show, because as any good, I guess, professional development piece should involve a reflection, we wanted to take some time to reflect a little bit on some of those good things that we hope to see come back. I know anecdotally, we were back in person at the end of the year, and there was, I think, a hard shift back to don't use screens unless you have to. And, let's give it a little time over the summer. And now that we have devices we have more devices available where we didn't in the past, what might that look like in the future if you used them and leveraged them for, better learning?
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That wasn't a question. It was just a thought that's going through my head.
Yeah. Well, I think about this idea that we're going to snap back. I mean, we even hear it in the news about, things are back to normal. We're getting back, things like travel and just, seeing Memorial Day, I think was a big day that people saw family. My backyard neighbor is having a whole bunch of friends over because they had a 1-year-old during, now they had a baby during the pandemic and they're finally getting the whole family together. So there's a lot of the snap back things. And I do worry that the things that we learned during this time might get lost. My guess, my theory is what is going to happen is that we're not going to get like Dale Basler's individual preference of what should have happened. It's going to come out organically. I think there's going to start to be conversations of like, well, we were able to do this during the pandemic. Why can't we do it now? We're going to have things like, live streaming an event is just going to be, at our fingertips now. We're going to do that. We're going to maybe be a little more flexible with schedules or things like that because we know it's possible.
Well, I think there's going to be like opportunities for parent conferences to be half online and half in person. We know that like our board meetings have shifted to an online presence, and while we are back in person, we want to keep that online presence in addition. Things like that.
When you were talking, you made me think of two kind of success stories, I think, like things that can be used as great examples of how we can leverage what we've learned and still like really take some benefits from it. And I think there's a lot, but these are just two that are a little bit different. One in terms of providing access for kids who, for any number of reasons, whether they're going through challenges and kind of anxiety around school, or if they're dealing with like long-term health-related, who can really still feel connected to school systems. Because I remember a clear example. I was teaching a middle school at the time, and a student on our team was having some significant challenges with school-related anxiety. And there was really no good way. She had some home tutoring support, but there wasn't really a good way for me as a teacher to stay connected with her. And so the gains we've made in understanding how virtual learning can supplement our work in the classroom, I feel like can be really beneficial for students in those types of situations, and so we don't have to lose kids. Or maybe in those types of situations, and then the other piece I think is connected to elements of just good professional learning design, right? When pre-pandemic, there were very few times where we would consider virtual learning as a mode. If it was like an online course, maybe, but like we just kind of box things into that online course world. Now, though, we can really take a look at what our outcomes are, and we can really consider the voices of those educators who will be involved and make better decisions about whether things should be face-to-face, whether they should be totally virtual, whether they should exist in some sort of hybrid format. And so we can be more flexible for educators and be more in tune with what will work for them given their individual circumstances and like given the hoped for outcome of the work that we're doing.
The first part that you mentioned, connecting with kids and who can't attend school physically for any reason. And we do have some e-school. We have some other kind of options within our district, but there's not always a good like in-between piece here. And I work with our 4K team, and one thing as we were reflecting on the year, they told me was like, they said, because they're community wide, so almost every year they have a child that's battling cancer of some sort. And the most important part for them is the social connection to their classes and their students. And they were like thrilled that, oh, now we have ways to do that without it feeling like it's an insurmountable obstacle. And if nothing else, they take that out of what we went through.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about this whole idea that, and I don't know if you're hearing it in your circles, that the kids are behind. I just got done talking to a family member who's in Germany right now, and he described it as their kids are a year and a half behind. Now, I think that was coming directly from like a seat time measurement.
Sure.
What are your thoughts about the discussion of the kids are behind, the kids need to catch up or be caught up?
Yeah.
Is there any merit to that discussion? And if so, or if not, regardless, how should we move forward with those ideas?
Yeah, it's a huge conversation in our circles here. And so there's two things. One personal piece for me is I would rather not focus on a term like learning loss, right? I'd rather really take a look at what students and educators and whole communities gained from the experience, right? Like, because if something's lost, it's like it's gone, right? It's right. So like, why not look at what students and educators are now more prepared to do and build off that? Because it when you're in situation, it's just my belief, gentlemen, but when you're in situations that are totally different, the idea of catching up seems like it seems like our time and energy and resources could be better spent in other ways, right? And so one of the things that we've really been focusing on is working with schools and districts to think about how they can help their communities see the benefits, the growth that's come out of this. And sometimes that's like really tangible. In other cases, it's just an opportunity to ask good questions, right? Like, so our experiences this year also helped to shine a light on some of the inequities that existed, right?
Absolutely. Inequities that we were conveniently ignoring.
Correct. Right. So I again, when you have structures that are, retain a status quo for a certain amount of time, you don't even necessarily think to ask those questions. So I think even that, raising important questions about access, right? Taking a look at New York State put together a really fascinating state level survey on digital equity, and data was really eye-opening. And that is not, I believe, that is not data that would have come forward were it not for this. And so that's a great community learning. And then on the smaller, more individual side, let's talk about the resilience that kids showed. I mean, honestly, I think for all our worries that kids were going to really struggle with what the year looked like, I think many did. I think there were challenges, but I think it was a lot of more on our adults, right? Like, more, as an adult,
Well, these are adult problems, yeah.
Yeah, projecting some of our assumptions on our kids, right? And those challenges we face. So to make a long story short, I've really been trying to help shift the conversation to really looking at accomplishments, not looking at it as a deficit model. Because if you believe that you're a year and a half behind, you're going to have the time to quote unquote catch up. So why not focus on what you were able to do and build off of that going forward?
Sure. I think a little bit. There's certain things that I want to sit and mull over this. I want to reflect on this and see what shakes loose in the next few months, because I think there's going to be people that they're ready to be done. They were so eager to be hitting the last day of school in our district. I know you have that coming up soon for you, and it was like, we just got to push forward and close the books on this year. But when they sit back and start to think about next year, that reflection might take root in some interesting ways. And I use that as a pun because I'm hoping that there's one of the things that I would do back in the classroom, I would do more plants. And that was from the podcast that we did with India Carlson, a teacher in Oregon who sent plants home. And she said it was one of the more rewarding experiences doing it at home than even at school. And, she's like, I think I'm going to continue this going forward. And why not?
She had a drive-through plant pickup.
Oh, I love it.
The librarian was jealous because kids were coming more for plants than books. Maybe not more, but they were excited to be there for plants. And
how great!
Yeah, it was. It was a neat story that. And again, I think it was something that this is one of these courageous moments where people are thinking creatively and doing something that they just don't really know the outcome, and it turned out to be a wild success.
Yeah, and I think that's like my ultimate hope, right? That we have a means to highlight those wild successes and get them in front of as many people as will look and will listen, because it's a pretty rare, pandemic is a pretty rare event, right? But it's pretty rare, right? It's pretty rare to be in a situation where everybody within a profession or community or society, for goodness sake, is like a first year in whatever their
yeah,
like everybody end of the spring last year, this August or September, depending on when you started, it was like you were a first year teacher or building or district leader, right?
Oh, as a universal leveler.
Yes. So there is, I believe, some value in having those situations where we force ourselves to kind of use that universal leveler.
Come out of our comfort zone. Do something that we were afraid to do before, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also made us get rid of some of the dumb stuff. The busy work of education, perhaps. Maybe district leaders are like, you know what? We don't never need to do that again. And I hope that sticks.
It was really hard to do word searches online, so I guess we're not going to do those anymore.
You make a joke, but yes, I hope so. I hope that it helped us prioritize foundational elements of education, and what maybe the excess that we removed hopefully will stay removed. Right, so long as it made sense for us to do that.
There's obviously teachers and districts and states use different platforms and different tools, but in the end pretty much had the same goals in mind and accomplished very similar things. And I think that's a good way to remember that, there's more than one way for a learning outcome to be achieved in the classroom. And we often, I think we've come away from it a lot, but we often tend to teach one thing and expect the students to all have a similar product in the end. And, maybe a reflection on this is that, my kids can do other things to achieve the same outcome. Maybe they can use different tools. Maybe they can explore different ways of learning the item or the practice at hand.
I would agree. I think it's a great reflection.
Yeah, there was no standout tool that was like, oh, I mean, there were categories of tools, let's say video conference, that kind of thing. But there wasn't like anybody that said like, this is this, like even your kids, Fred, were talking about it, like Google Meet versus Zoom or something like that. None of those things were stand out. And sometimes we used to focus too much on the tool. And I think we all learned that it was like, oh, what flavor are you using? Oh, okay. And it didn't really matter on those.
You're driving
aspects.
a Ford, you're driving a Volkswagen. We're all going to get there.
As long as your plan, your trip plan was set out right.
You know what I love too? I thought it was just so powerful to have educators have been connecting across community lines for a long time, right? And so social media has helped allow for that. However, it was just awesome to have the opportunity to work more from like a professional learning standpoint, but also like direct to students, just allowing for connections from much further afield.
Mm-hmm.
So much of the work that we normally do in our region is tied to people who are in our region already. It's New Yorkers in the southern part of the state, right? Like supporting each other's growth, which is really awesome. But we had the opportunity to connect with expertise across the country, into Canada, around the world in ways that we probably wouldn't have thought of were we not all connecting virtually. So we were able to make relationships and deepen our own understanding of what education looks like outside of our own regional or state silos, which I think is important.
Yeah, just the time zones were the biggest obstacle for many of those situations. And even then, when we talked to Pocket Lab, they did those conferences, and they basically said there were people like waiting up across the world just to participate and be a part of this event. So it does happen. Fred, you work with a lot of teachers. Obviously, you're in a professional development category. That's kind of your job right now. Do you see that some people weathered the last year and a half better than others? And were there any characteristics that you would say, oh yeah, this allowed them to do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So most definitely. I think that probably the most helpful characteristic, which transcends education, it's not tied to our profession, was a recognition and willingness of the value of flexibility. I think that the people who felt that, there was a lot that, could be controlled, but also some things that they had to be comfortable not knowing the answer to, tended to be able to put more energy into supporting the students or staff they work with, and wasted less energy on like perseverating around the unknown. I think certainly a learning for me was pushing me even more into that realm of flexibility and welcoming, I don't know. We talk about it in science all the time, right? The willingness for all teachers, and particularly science teachers, to welcome questions more than answers. And I think that this was, holy cow, an experience that if you were able to do that, you were more apt to feel that your work was successful. Right, so that really feels like the pedestal characteristic for not only outward success but inward success and efficacy. If you were just comfortable in saying like, look, I don't know where this is going to go, and we're just going to try it. And,
risk taking.
Yeah. Yep.
But to also come back and, look at your data and make a next adjustment too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Such a good point, right? It wasn't like, random paths through a forest, right? I mean, it was educated consideration for steps to take and things to try, but a willingness for that not necessarily to be the answer, right? And I think that that was something that I saw in people who really exhibited that, particularly last spring, being able to get back.
Oh yeah,
kids, yeah.
And just the other thing would be that I noticed is just the amount of empathy when people were able to take a step back and put themselves in shoes of colleagues and in shoes of parents, the students. I think that went a long way. And that's a characteristic that we look for in teachers all the time, but it really shined during this past year and a half.
I would agree. Yeah, that's huge, right? The willingness to open up to be vulnerable ourselves, right? So people, okay. And then also to really be willing to give of ourselves and take care of people, because each of us experienced hardship over these last 15 months in different ways. Some of us were really impacted personally and physically, and others it might have been more on the secondary level. But if we all were willing to give space to others to help them feel cared for, that also allowed us to feel much more successful.
Yeah. I think our community learned a lot too, learned a lot about what schools did. I think all of a sudden there were community members that were realizing, whoa, wait a minute. The schools are feeding the kids. The schools are, in some cases, doing laundry for kids. They didn't realize how much of the day-to-day that the school was, taking care of for certain families.
And while I bristle at the sense that school is just daycare, obviously that is a component that is important for people as well. And I think people really realize that that allows us to kind of go about our day in other ways that we take for granted.
Yeah, like how much it affects the economy, like how childcare is so tied to employment and unemployment and all those kinds of decisions.
Well, any last words, Fred? I know you mentioned that you had, you had some preconceived notions about, maybe, or you saw some teachers with preconceived notions going into, the unknown, and they were holding on to, I guess, onto fears. Did you have any fears that you realized, oh, this wasn't so bad?
I had about 6 months before the pandemic started, I had moved into a new role in my organization. So I was leading a department of about 30 staff members who I had worked with, some for the last 10 years, and so had really great relationships, but had not been in a role where I was supervising and supporting all of these members of our organization. And so I think sometimes when you transition into a role, you can feel like you have to show your value, right? That you have to be able to answer all the questions and know all there is to know, right? And I think despite my best intentions, I fell into that trap during those first few months. Probably because I had a bit of like imposter syndrome. You just think like, wow, this is a role that I haven't learned all I need to learn in order to help everybody. Right? I think it's a common thing we all go through. But what was a real growth area for me is the pandemic forced me to recognize that not only did I not have all the answers, that it was better that I didn't. So we could kind of chart a course together, which led to better decisions being made overall. So that being able to take a step back in my own educational leadership style and welcome, kind of find that golden ratio of questions to answers a little bit better, was a real important takeaway for me, and a fear that I had going into the role and into the pandemic was a fear that wasn't realized. It wasn't something I needed to worry about.
Okay. I think back to over the last year, and there was a sense of like, when does this end? And that's obviously still, it's not the end for a lot of people, but all of a sudden we hit May, and we're usually done in early June in our area. And, watching, I think, some of the relief on people as they kind of, like they cross the finish line. Like, we've just run a marathon, and my face is all red, and I'm dripping, and I've got chafing where we don't want to talk about it, but we made it. And, that was such a hard place to imagine back in August and September and even January.
Oh, I went back and listened to the last time we talked, Fred, and we said something like, one of us said like, well, if it goes on for 2 weeks.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, I had to actually, it's funny because this was I think it was February. And of course we were hearing everything on the news, and I had an NSTA Express, and Dale and I were meeting with our team. There's another person in there, and someone wrote on the NSTA Express in pencil, "Corona is coming." And this was, again, this is before everything's kind of happening. And I remember our boss coming in, and I'm saying to him, like, so what do you think? Are we going to be having to shut down soon to pivot to online learning? And he's like, no, that'll never happen here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Surprise.
How much we've learned.
We were planning to go to an NSTA conference in Boston, and then those started to watch all of them be canceled around there, and we're like, yeah, this ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. I remember. Wow, it's that.
I know.
Talking to my wife and saying, I'm supposed to go to a conference next week. What do you think I should do? It was such a bizarre, in that end of February into early March of 2020 phase. Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, yep. And one of the conferences that was there was like in the news afterwards because it was like a virologist's conference, and there was like a bit of an outbreak going on at that conference. It was like before we got to that same facility. So
amazing. Yeah.
Crazy. All right. Well, I think this is giving us a lot to think about. I really appreciate, Fred, you taking the time and donating your lovely 2 children to be part of the show and kind of put a nice recap on since the last time when we started all of this, and we were kind of completely naive going into it, but now we can kind of look back with some experience and hopefully make good with what that experience has given us, and really see if we can make some changes.
Yeah, I would say, Brian and Dale, that I am. It was really cool to reconnect and chat a little over a year later. Mm-hmm. It'd be interesting to listen to this episode side by side with last March. But I also want to thank you both for giving us the opportunity to chat. I've been a huge fan of the work that you do, so I'm just honored to have the chance to chat with you more than once, which is great.
You bet. I think you got the record now.
You're at 6 times. In fact, I had to brand a new name for your episodes. I'm calling them Endisodes.
Well, I'm honored
to
have that title.
Yes. And we'll have you back. We'll invite you to number 7 and 8 and go from there.
And hopefully we'll see each other in person sometime. Maybe there'll be a new NSTA conference. I think the next in-person one is in Portland, Oregon.
Oh.
Portland, Maryland, and Los Angeles. Those are area conferences. I think those are coming back in person.
Very cool.
So that should be exciting. All right. Well, thank you so much, Fred.
Thank you, Fred, and please thank 7 and 11 for their time today.
I will. Thank you both.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Lab Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about some of the things discussed in this episode or previous episodes, you can find show notes at our website, laboutloud.com. If you have a guest idea or a future topic that you'd like to see on Lab Out Loud, go to our contact page and send us a message. Also, you can subscribe to Lab Out Loud on your favorite podcasting app, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to find podcasts. While you're there, leave us a review and rating. Your input helps others find our show. Thanks again for listening.